When my son Ethan brought his fiancée Lena to dinner, I wanted the evening to feel warm and familiar. I cooked the same jasmine rice and stir-fried vegetables he'd loved since childhood. The house smelled like home. Lena arrived perfectly dressed, all charm and compliments. She praised everything from my curtains to the rice bowl, her voice soft and sugary. And her parents, an elegant, stiff pair, smiled in rehearsed approval. I kept my smile too. Decades of teaching had taught me how to watch people without seeming to. I noticed how Lena's eyes never matched her smile, how she spoke just a bit too sweetly, how her compliments felt like they'd been memorized from a script. I told myself not to judge too fast. People can be nervous at family dinners, but something about her felt calculated. Then halfway through the meal, the air changed. Lena leaned toward her parents and started speaking in Mandarin. I didn't react. She clearly thought I didn't understand a word. She has no idea, she said. Look at her, those hands, that face. I'll marry the son, get my visa and be gone in a year. Then I'll find someone with real money. Her parents chuckled quietly. Her mother whispered, "Just keep pretending to like the food. You're almost there." I felt the words hit me like cold water, but I didn't move. I didn't frown. I simply reached for the rice bowl, placed it gently in front of her father, and spoke in the same calm Mandarin I had once used in university lectures. "Would you like more rice, sir? And please tell your daughter I taught this language long before she was born." The silence that followed was so thick it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Lena's face turned pale. Her mother froze. Her father stared at his plate. Ethan looked between us confused, not knowing what had just been said, but sensing it wasn't good. I smiled again, but this time it wasn't polite, it was steady. The kind that says, "I saw everything. I know everything." After they left, I washed the dishes, but left them drying on the rack. Every time I glanced at them, I could still hear her voice mocking me. It stung, but not in the way she probably hoped. I'd been insulted before by students, by colleagues, by life itself. I'd survived worse. That night, sitting alone at the kitchen table, I realized something I had taught others for years, but never truly lived until now. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is power. And sometimes the quietest person in the room understands far more than anyone expects. The next evening, Ethan came by alone. He carried a small box of pastries from that cafe downtown, the one with the overly sweet crème brûlée crust he knew I didn't really like but always pretended to enjoy. He placed the box on the counter like a peace offering. "Mum." He started softly loosening his tie, trying to sound casual. "About last night. I think you might have misunderstood, Lena. Maybe the tone or something got lost. You've been tired lately, right? She's under a lot of pressure too. A new country, a new family, all these expectations." I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap. I let him speak. Every word was familiar. The same gentle reasoning he used as a boy, when he wanted to make excuses for someone who'd hurt him. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. When he finished, he smiled weakly, searching my face for agreement. I gave him the kindest smile I could manage, one that said more than words ever could. I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. Not because he doubted me, but because he couldn't see what was right in front of him. It's strange being a mother. You raise a child to see the good in people, to give others a chance to forgive. And then one day that same lesson becomes the wall between you. You watch your child protect someone who doesn't deserve it, and you realize he's not defending her. He's defending the illusion of love he's built in his own head. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the same kitchen where I'd taught him how to read, where he used to do his homework, where we used to talk about everything. The silence felt heavier than usual. It wasn't anger, it was distance, a slow, quiet curtain falling between us. I could have argued. I could have shouted the truth until he was forced to believe me. But love isn't about winning arguments. It's about timing and knowing when words will only push someone further away. So I made a decision. I wouldn't try to convince him anymore. I would find the truth myself. Not to prove a point, but to protect him, even if he didn't see the danger yet. That's the thing about being a mother, you learn when to speak and when to act. And sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all. I woke up the next morning with a clear plan. Arguing would not change Ethan's mind, so I shifted from feelings to facts. I called Mara, one of my brightest former students. Years ago, she was the quiet one who noticed details other people missed. Now she works in immigration enforcement. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when she heard my voice, she said she had time. No small talk. Just tell me what you need. We met at a small cafe near the park, the kind of place where the coffee is strong and no one watches your conversation. I slid my phone across the table and showed her Lena's engagement photos and the announcement Ethan had sent. I didn't dramatize what happened at dinner. I simply asked for help, verifying who Lena really was. When something feels wrong, start with identity. It is amazing how often a clean story falls apart at the spelling of a name. Mara took notes, then said she would check what she could. She did not promise outcomes. She promised process. That alone calmed me. When your heart is loud, trust people who work in facts. 2 days later, her message came through. The name was off. Not a typo, an alias. I read the text twice, then a third time out loud. If the name is borrowed, what else is on loan? That question became my map. I opened a new notebook and made a list. Not of accusation, but of places to look. Venues, photographers, public records, rental studios, casting sites. I searched with the patience of a librarian and the curiosity of a parent who refuses to be blind. The engagement photos looked familiar, so I reverse-checked the background. Same arch, same fabric drape, same lighting pattern. I found the exact studio plus 4 other sample galleries using the identical set. Staged romance sold by the hour, then the parents. Their faces rang a small bell in my head. I looked through portfolios from local event actors. There they were under a family package, ideal for ceremonies and immigration photos. Price by session, smiles included. That detail did not make me angry. It made me certain. Mara's next update landed later that week. Lena's legal name is Shu Min. Still married in Guangzhou, no divorce on file. The words sat on my kitchen table like stones. I did not rush to call Ethan. I brewed tea and let the facts settle. That was not avoidance, that was strategy. When the truth is this heavy, you carry it carefully. I printed everything and built a folder: alias records, studio rental invoices, the casting page for the parents, copies of the marriage certificate, screenshots labeled by date and source. I used sticky notes like I used to prepare lectures, clear, simple, undeniable. If you have to present hard truth to someone you love, make it easy to follow and impossible to dismiss. I also made a call to an old contact, Agent Han, whom I knew from guest lectures. I asked for discretion. I said the matter might be federal rather than personal. He did not pry. He asked for the file and said he would open a case if warranted. Wheels began to move, not with drama, but with procedure. All week I kept my routine. Library in the morning, groceries in the afternoon, a short walk before sunset. Discipline is a life raft when emotions want to drown you. Each evening I added one more proof, one more note, one more connection. The picture sharpened until it could not be explained away by nerves or culture or tone. By Friday, I was ready. Not because I wanted a scene, but because I respected timing. Evidence gathered. Support in place. Next steps mapped. Wisdom is not only what you know, it is when you act and how you keep your hands steady. If you ever face something like this, remember a few simple anchors, verify names, document everything, save copies in more than one place, ask professionals rather than chasing rumors. And when you finally choose to speak, do it once clearly with a record that stands on its own. I closed the folder and set it beside my late husband's watch. Not a trophy. A reminder. Love needs truth to survive, and truth needs preparation. The curtain would fall soon enough. When it did, I intended to be the one holding the light. By Friday, everything was ready. I invited Lena and her parents over again, using the same calm tone I always did. Ethan sounded relieved on the phone. He thought I was finally giving her another chance. I let him believe that. Sometimes to reveal the truth, you have to let people feel safe first. That evening I set the table exactly the way I had before. The same white plates, the same teapot, even the same folded napkins, shaped like lotus flowers that Lena had admired. Nothing looked different on the surface, but every detail was deliberate. This wasn't a dinner, it was a stage. When they arrived, Lena carried a bouquet of orchids and a carefully rehearsed smile. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said, softly, placing the flowers in my hands. Her parents stood behind her, still playing their parts. Kind, polite, a little too polished. Ethan looked genuinely happy. He thought this meant peace. Dinner began the same way the first had. Small talk, laughter that didn't reach the eyes. Compliments that sounded more like lines from a script. I nodded, served tea, and waited. Every word they spoke, every fake smile I filed away silently, because I knew what was coming. Halfway through dessert, I excused myself. I walked to the front door just as headlights swept across the driveway. Agent Han stepped out of an unmarked car, calm and professional, his expression unreadable, right on time. When I returned to the dining room, the air still smelled of jasmine and sugar. I stood by my chair and said quietly, "Before we finish, I've invited someone else to join us." Agent Han entered steady and polite, carrying a small folder. He placed it on the table and opened it with deliberate care. His voice was even almost gentle as he spoke. "Ms. Shu Min," he said, addressing Lena by her real name. "You are under investigation for immigration fraud. You are not under arrest at this time, but we have questions regarding your current identity and visa application." For a moment, no one breathed. Lena froze, her face drained of color. Ethan looked at me in disbelief, as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. The so-called father fumbled with his jacket. The mother stayed seated, her hands folded tightly together. Then Lena moved suddenly, desperately, pushing back her chair, her voice shaking. "You set me up." I met her eyes steady and calm. "No," I said. "You set yourself up. I just turned on the light." She ran toward the door and her father followed clumsily. The mother stayed behind her mask, finally breaking. She looked at Agent Han, then at me, and whispered, "I'll cooperate." Ethan sat, frozen, his mind racing to catch up with the truth. The reality of it all settled on his shoulders like a weight he wasn't ready for. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. I simply sat down again, letting the silence speak. That night, after everyone left the house, felt still. The air was heavy with what had been revealed, but not sad, just clear. The lies had burned away, and all that was left was truth. There's a certain peace that comes when you stop chasing explanations and simply let reality stand. That night, I didn't need to say another word. The truth had already spoken for me. It was close to midnight when the phone rang. I had been sitting by the window, the house quiet, the kind of silence that carries its own heartbeat. When I saw Ethan's name flash across the screen, my chest tightened. I wasn't sure if he would ever call again after what happened. His voice was small, broken in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. He didn't start with excuses. He simply said, "Mum, you were right." Then came the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. He told me everything. How the agents had questioned Lena, how she eventually confessed to the lies, the false name, the fake parents, even her hidden marriage back in China. His voice shook as he spoke, part shame, part relief. "I thought you were trying to ruin what I had," he said. "I didn't realize you were saving me. I didn't rush to comfort him. I let the words hang in the air so he could hear their weight. Forgiveness isn't something you hand over like a gift. It's something that grows back slowly, like grass, after a fire." Finally, I said, "You didn't fail, Ethan. You trusted. That isn't weakness. But now you know what trust should look like." He didn't answer right away, only breathed deeply as if trying to find steady ground again. 2 days later, he showed up at my door, eyes tired and red. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, holding a cup of coffee from that same cafe, the one with the burnt sugar crust he always thought I liked. When he handed it to me, his hand trembled slightly. "I owe you more than I can say," he whispered. We sat in the kitchen without filling the silence. I poured the coffee, the kettle whistling softly, the same sound that had filled this room through so many stages of our life together. He looked around, noticing that everything looked exactly as before. "You kept everything the same," he said quietly. "Some things don't need changing," I replied. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'll make this right." I didn't say I believed him, but I let him try, because sometimes belief starts there, in the space between apology and action. That night, as he left, I found a note he'd slipped beside his empty cup. It said, "Thank you, Mum." Just 3 words, but they carried more honesty than any speech could. When the door closed, I realized the house didn't feel as heavy anymore. It exhaled like it had been holding its breath all this time. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, it just makes room for something better to begin. After everything, I went back to my old routine. The library felt exactly as it always had. The smell of paper dust and a faint hint of orange polish the janitor liked to use. Returning there felt like closing a circle. That place had seen so many versions of me, the young professor chasing deadlines, the widow learning to breathe again, and now the woman who had just watched truth burn through illusion. I began keeping a small journal again, the one my husband had given me years ago, with a note that read, "Write down what the heart understands before the mind catches up." Each morning before the doors opened, I'd write for a few minutes. Not to record events, but to untangle thoughts. Writing helped me see that healing doesn't always look like triumph. It often looks like routine, quietly resuming. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the Department of Homeland Security. I placed it on the kitchen counter beside my tea and let the steam rise before opening it. The case against Lena had moved forward charges of fraud, false documentation, misrepresentation of marital status. Her visa had been revoked. Ethan had officially withdrawn his affidavit of support. There was no blame attached to him, no suspicion. Just a formal statement that the system had corrected itself. I folded the letter neatly and put it back into the envelope. I didn't feel joy, only a deep calm. Justice isn't about watching someone fall. It's about watching the truth stand. That Sunday, Ethan came over again with groceries in one hand and 2 cups of coffee in the other. He didn't knock like before, but he waited outside until I opened the door. That simple change told me everything. We cooked together quietly. rice porridge, ginger scallions, the comfort food of second chances. He asked questions about my youth, about his father, about the poems I used to recite when he was too young to understand them. It was like rebuilding a bridge one plank at a time. At one point he looked up and said I should have listened. I shook my head. You didn't fail, Ethan. You trusted. That's how people learn what trust really means. He smiled weakly. There was relief in that smile, the kind that only comes after surviving the truth. When he left the house, didn't feel empty anymore. It felt settled, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote one final line. A mother hears with her heart even what others think she doesn't understand. Then I underlined it and closed the book. Because sometimes wisdom doesn't shout. It doesn't seek revenge. It waits. It listens. And when the time is right, it lets the truth speak for itself.